I always thought the worst way to find out your wife was cheating was through a text message or a phone call, but I was wrong. Turns out there are far worse ways. More humiliating, more unforgettable, ways that shake you to your core and make you question everything you thought you knew about your life. My moment of truth happened on a Friday night, and I remember every goddamn second of it. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. My boss had let us out early after a big project wrapped up, and instead of calling Emily to let her know, I figured I'd surprise her. She'd been distant lately, always claiming to be exhausted or busy with work. I had planned on picking up her favorite takeout, a small gesture to break whatever wall had formed between us. But when I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something strange. Her car wasn't there. That was odd because she had no plans that evening. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe she ran to the store or grabbed dinner with a friend. I let myself in and tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter. The house was eerily quiet, except for a faint humming noise coming from upstairs. It wasn't the TV, and it wasn't music. It was something else, something I couldn't quite place. I felt a strange chill crawl up my spine as I walked toward the stairs. I don't know why, but my gut was screaming at me. Something was wrong. I took the stairs two at a time, my heartbeat picking up. The closer I got to our bedroom, the louder the noise became. And then, just as I reached the door, I realized what I was hearing. Laughter. Not just any laughter. Emily's laughter. But not the kind she gave me. This was different. This was flirtatious. Playful. The kind of laugh a woman gives when she's completely caught up in the moment with someone she desires. I stood frozen, my hand on the doorknob, my entire body rigid. Every rational thought in my mind told me to turn around, to leave, to spare myself from what was on the other side. But some sick, twisted part of me needed to see it. I needed the proof. So I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Emily was sitting on our bed, her back to the door, wearing nothing but one of my dress shirts. Only it wasn't buttoned. Her long legs were curled up beneath her, and she was leaning forward, giggling like a damn schoolgirl. Across from her, sprawled out on my side of the bed, was another man. He was shirtless, his pants unbuttoned, his entire posture oozing confidence, as if he belonged there. I don't remember making a sound, but Emily must have sensed something because she suddenly stiffened, then turned her head slightly. When she saw me, her face drained of color so fast it was almost impressive. Her lips parted, but for the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. "Go ahead," I said, my voice disturbingly calm. "Explain this." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The guy, on the other hand, had the audacity to sit up, rubbing the back of his neck like he was the victim here. He started, but I didn't let him finish. "Shut the fuck up," I snapped, my eyes never leaving Emily's. "You don't get to speak." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I wasn't buying it. She could cry all she wanted, but it wasn't going to change the fact that she had destroyed everything we built. I waited, giving her a chance to dig her own grave, to see if she had even the slightest ounce of honesty left in her. Steve, this isn't," she stammered, pulling the shirt around her like that was going to make her decent again. "This isn't what?" I asked, my voice rising now. "What the fuck isn't this, Emily? Because it sure as hell looks like you're half naked on our bed with some random asshole while I'm supposed to be at work." She flinched at my words, but still didn't offer a real explanation. Instead, she did what cheaters always do. She reached for an excuse. "It's not what you think," she finally blurted, her voice desperate. "We were just talking." I laughed, a cold, humorless laugh that made her flinch again. "Talking," I repeated. "You think I'm fucking stupid?" Her hands trembled as she pulled the shirt tighter around herself. "I swear it just happened. I wasn't." "Oh, save it." I cut her off. "Just happened." "What? You accidentally landed on the bed half-dressed with him. How stupid do you think I am?" She opened her mouth again, but before she could spew another pathetic excuse, I turned my attention to the guy. "What's your name?" I asked, my tone sharp as a blade. The guy hesitated, then muttered, "Daniel." "Well, Daniel," I said, stepping closer. "You've got about 5 seconds to get the fuck out of my house before I make you regret ever meeting her." He scrambled off the bed so fast he nearly tripped over his own damn pants. As he hurriedly grabbed his shirt, and shoes, Emily reached out toward me. "Steve, please," she whispered, her voice shaking now. Can we talk?" I took a step back, shaking my head slowly. "Talk," I echoed. "Now you want to talk?" Tears slipped down her face as she nodded. It was a mistake, I swear. I wasn't thinking in. You weren't thinking?" I scoffed. "You sure as hell looked like you were thinking real hard when you were laughing with him on her bed." She sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I stared at her, feeling absolutely nothing. No sympathy, no sadness, just pure, seething rage. "Get dressed," I said coldly. "You're leaving." She dropped her hands, her eyes wide with shock. "Wait, what?" "You heard me," I said. "I don't want to look at you. I don't want to breathe the same air as you. Pack your shit and get the fuck out." Her bottom lip trembled. "Steve, please." "I mean it, Emily," I cut her off. "If you're not out in 10 minutes, I'll throw your shit on the lawn myself." She let out a choked sob, but I didn't care. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her to cry alone. She had already made her choice. Now it was my turn to make mine. Emily sat frozen on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched into fists as she stared at me like she couldn't believe what was happening. The tears on her face were real, I could tell, but they weren't the kind of tears that came from remorse. They were the kind that came from getting caught. I watched her open her mouth, hesitate, then close it again like she was still trying to come up with some last-ditch effort to save herself. The silence stretched, but I didn't fill it for her. I wanted to see what kind of story she would come up with, how far she was willing to go to cover up the truth, even when it was sitting right there in front of us. She swallowed hard, her hands shaking as she reached for the discarded blanket at the foot of the bed and pulled it around her like that would somehow make this situation any less pathetic. "Steve, please, just let me explain before you." "Before I what?" I cut in, my voice sharp. "Before I throw your shit out the door? Before I tell you exactly how fucking disgusting this is?" "Go ahead," Emily explained. "Give me the magical excuse that makes this all better." She let out a shuddering breath, her fingers gripping the fabric so tightly her knuckles turned white. I wasn't thinking straight. I was drunk. I interrupted again. Bored? Lonely? Or maybe just fucking selfish. Her head snapped up, and for the first time since I'd walked in, I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, something closer to anger. It was so quick I almost missed it, but it was there, a flash of indignation, like she had the nerve to be mad at me in this moment. It made my stomach turn. "You haven't exactly been the most present husband," she finally said, her voice quieter now, but edged with something sharp. "You come home, you eat, you sit on your damn phone or laptop, and then you go to bed. You don't talk to me. You don't look at me like you used to. It's like I don't even exist in this house anymore unless you need something from me." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed in the room. "So that's it, huh? That's your defense? I didn't pay enough attention to you. So you decided to spread your legs for some other guy?" Jesus Christ, Emily. She flinched, but I wasn't going to soften my words for her. "Not now. It wasn't like that," she whispered. "Then tell me exactly what it was like." I shot back, because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty fucking clear. "You brought some random asshole into our bed, and—" "He's not random," she blurted out, and the second the words left her mouth, she knew she had fucked up. I saw it in the way her entire face fell, the way she sucked in a breath like she had just realized she had handed me another weapon to use against her. I took a step closer, watching her shrink under my gaze. "Not random," I repeated slowly, letting the weight of those words sink in. "So how long has this been going on?" She shook her head quickly, her eyes darting to the side like she was trying to find an escape. It hasn't been." "How long?" I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice, but the way her entire body tensed told me she knew she had no way out of this. There was a long, agonizing pause before she finally whispered, "A few months." I felt something in my chest tighten, something deep and ugly and impossible to ignore. Months. Not a mistake, not a one-time fuck-up. This wasn't some drunken lapse in judgment. This was something she had been actively doing repeatedly right under my nose. While I was going to work, paying the bills, doing everything I could to make sure we had a good life, she was sneaking around with some other guy, coming home to our house, kissing me goodnight with the same mouth she used on him. I turned away, running a hand through my hair as I tried to keep myself from putting a hole in the damn wall. Jesus fucking Christ, Emily, I muttered under my breath. I don't even know who the fuck you are anymore. She was crying again, but I didn't care. I didn't care about the way her hands trembled or the way she looked at me like I was breaking her heart, because she had already broken mine. I never wanted to hurt you, she said, her voice cracking. I turned back to face her, my expression blank. Then why did you? She didn't have an answer for that. Of course she didn't, because there was no answer that would make any of this okay. The guy, Daniel, had been smart enough to leave without another word, which was the only reason he was still breathing right now. But that didn't mean I was done with this. Not even close. You have 10 minutes to pack a bag, I finally said, my voice cold. And then you're leaving? She blinked up at me, confused. What? Where am I supposed to go? Not my fucking problem, I said. Call your little boyfriend. Call a friend. Call a fucking Uber for all I care. But you're not staying here. Steve, please don't do this like this, she begged, standing up now, the blankets slipping from her shoulders. We need to talk. We need to... There's nothing left to talk about, Emily. I took a step toward the door, not wanting to be in this room a second longer. Pack your shit and get out. She didn't move at first, just stood there, her body trembling, her mouth opening and closing like she was still trying to find something to say that would fix this. But there was nothing. Nothing that would change the fact that she had already burned everything to the fucking ground. I turned away without another word and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't care where she went. I didn't care what she did. All I knew was that, as of this moment, I was done. Emily didn't move at first, just stood there in our bedroom like she was waiting for me to change my mind, like if she stalled long enough, I'd soften, sit down, and suddenly be open to some long-winded discussion about her feelings and how things just happened. But I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I wasn't interested in playing the role of the understanding husband who needed to be talked into forgiving his cheating wife. I wasn't in the mood to listen to her twist this into some kind of tragic love story where she was the victim, where I was the one who had pushed her into another man's arms. I had given her 10 minutes to pack a bag, and I wasn't going to give her 1 second more than that. She finally seemed to realize that I wasn't bluffing when I came back upstairs and saw that she was still standing there, unmoving, her bag still empty on the bed. I walked straight past her, grabbed a handful of her clothes from the closet, and tossed them in the bag without a word. When she finally snapped out of whatever pathetic daze she was in, she reached for my wrist, but I yanked my arm back before she could touch me. Stop, please, she said, her voice shaking. Just talk to me. I ignored her and kept packing, throwing in random shirts, jeans, whatever the hell I grabbed first. I didn't care if I packed the wrong things. I just wanted her gone. Steve, you don't have to do this, she tried again. We can work through this. People make mistakes. I made a mistake, and I know it was wrong, but don't just throw everything away over one stupid decision. I stopped for a second and looked at her, shaking my head. One stupid decision? I asked. That's funny. I seem to remember you saying this has been going on for months. Was every single time just another stupid decision? Or was it a series of choices you made over and over again while coming home to me and pretending nothing was wrong? She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. You lied to my face for months, Emily. You sat across from me at dinner, told me about your day, kissed me goodnight, and acted like you weren't fucking someone else behind my back. You knew exactly what you were doing. Every single time, you made the choice to betray me. So don't stand there and try to make it sound like you just had some momentary lapse in judgment. That's not how this works. Tears were falling down her face again, but I didn't care. She had plenty of time to feel bad about what she was doing, and she hadn't. The only reason she was crying now was because she had been caught. You don't understand, she whispered. I let out a short, humorless laugh. I understand perfectly, I said. You didn't think you'd get caught. You thought you were smarter than me, that you could keep this up for as long as you wanted without me figuring it out. That's what this is, isn't it? She shook her head quickly. No, it's not like that. I zipped up the bag and threw it at her feet. Then tell me, Emily, what is it like? She hesitated, biting her lip, her hands gripping the fabric of her shirt so tightly I thought she might tear it. But she had nothing. No real explanation. No justification. Just empty words desperate pleas, and the look of someone who had just realized there was no way out of the mess they had created. I stepped back, running a hand through my hair, trying to push down the fury boiling in my chest. "You know what? It doesn't even matter," I muttered. "Nothing you say is going to change what you did." She took a shaky breath. "Steve, I love you." I froze, then turned to look at her with a disgusted expression. "You love me," I repeated. "Is that what you're going with? You love me, but you've been fucking another guy for months? Do you even hear yourself?" Her shoulders slumped, and she looked down at the floor. "I don't want to lose you." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep myself from yelling. "You lost me the second you decided to cheat. The second you decided that whatever the hell you had with him was more important than being faithful to me." Her breathing was uneven now, her whole body trembling. "Please, Steve, Get out." I cut her off. She flinched. "But, get out." She stared at me, probably expecting me to break, to let her stay, to at least say something that didn't sound so final. But I had nothing left to say. The damage was done. She let out a shaky exhale, grabbed the bag, and turned toward the door. But before she stepped out, she looked back one last time. "Is this really it?" she asked. "Are you really done?" I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. "I'm done." She nodded slowly, her face crumbling, and then she was gone. The second the door shut behind her, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. The house was quiet now. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only comes when something that once filled the space is suddenly missing. I stood there for a long time, staring at the door, trying to process everything that had just happened. The woman I had built a life with had walked out of this house, and I knew she wasn't coming back. Not as my wife. Not as the person I thought I knew. And the worst part? I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt empty. I stood in the doorway long after Emily had left, staring at nothing, listening to the faint echo of my own heartbeat in my ears. The house felt different now, hollow in a way I couldn't describe. There had been so much noise only minutes ago, her begging, my anger, the sound of my own voice telling her to get out, and now, nothing. Just silence. I wanted to believe I had done the right thing, that kicking her out was the only logical response, but no amount of logic could stop the ache in my chest. I wasn't sad she was gone. I wasn't even sad the marriage was over. I was angry at her, at myself, at the whole situation, but beneath all of that was something worse. The realization that everything I thought I had meant absolutely nothing. The nights we had spent together, the vacations, the inside jokes, the way I used to feel when I came home and saw her waiting for me. None of it mattered. Not to her. I forced myself to move, walking through the house with slow, heavy steps, my mind replaying the last few hours over and over again. I found myself standing in front of the dresser, staring at the spot where she had left her jewelry box. It was still there, untouched. The same hands that had taken off her wedding ring before she met up with him had once held my face and promised me forever. My stomach twisted at the thought. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen, expecting to see Emily's name, but it wasn't her. It was Mark, my best friend. I let out a breath and answered. "Hey," I said, my voice rough. "You okay?" His voice was cautious, like he already knew something was wrong. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Not even close. There was a pause on the other end, then a quiet sigh. "What happened?" "She cheated," I said flatly. "I walked in on her with some guy in our bedroom." Mark swore under his breath. "Jesus, man, are you serious?" "Dead serious," I muttered, rubbing a hand over my face. "I kick her out." "Good," he said immediately. "She doesn't deserve to be in that house after what she did." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He knew me well enough to know that even if I had done what needed to be done, it didn't mean I felt good about it. "You want me to come over?" he asked after a moment. I considered it for half a second before shaking my head. "No, I need some time to think." "I get that," he said. "But listen, don't let her get in your head. I know how you are. You'll start second-guessing yourself, trying to find a way to explain what she did, trying to make sense of it. Don't. She made a choice, and now she has to live with it." I closed my eyes. He was right. I had already started questioning everything, wondering if there was some sign I had missed, some moment where I could have stopped this before it started. But it wasn't my fault. It was hers. I know, I said quietly. I mean it, Steve. Don't let her manipulate you into thinking there's anything to save. You deserve better than that. I swallowed hard. Yeah. There was a pause. If you change your mind, I'll be there, Mark said. I know, I replied. Thanks. We hung up, and I stared at my phone for a long time before tossing it onto the bed and sitting down beside it. I didn't feel like thinking anymore. I didn't feel like being in this house, surrounded by memories that no longer meant anything. I grabbed my keys, threw on my jacket, and walked out the door. I drove without a destination, my hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary, my thoughts running in circles, my body running on something between anger and exhaustion. The streets were nearly empty, the streetlights casting dull glows on a pavement that I barely noticed as I passed. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. I just needed to be anywhere but in that house, surrounded by the reminders of a marriage that had just been turned to dust. My mind kept replaying every word Emily had said, every excuse, every pathetic attempt to justify what she had done. I wanted to stop thinking about it, but it was like my brain refused to let me have even a second of peace. At some point, I pulled into a gas station, not because I needed gas, but because I needed air. I got out of the car, leaned against the hood, and let the night sink into my skin. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I knew who it was. Emily wasn't going to stop trying to talk her way out of this, and I wasn't interested in hearing it. She had her chance to be honest, and she threw it away along with everything else. A few minutes passed before I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. A familiar voice called my name, and when I turned, I saw Derek standing a few feet away, a cigarette in one hand, a coffee in the other. He worked at the same company as me, though we weren't exactly close. He was one of those guys who always seemed to know everyone's business, the type who paid attention to things most people ignored. Didn't expect to see you out here, he said, taking a slow drag from a cigarette. Especially not this late. Yeah, well, I muttered, not really in the mood for conversation. Derek studied me for a second, then nodded like he had already figured it out. You look like a guy who just found out his wife's been screwing someone else, he said, his tone casual but knowing. I stiffened. What the hell did you just say? He shrugged. People talk, and I pay attention. He took another drag, exhaling the smoke slowly before tilting his head. You didn't know, did you? I felt my jaw tighten. You knew, I said, my voice flat. You knew and you didn't say anything? He held up a hand. Relax. I didn't know, no. Just heard some things. Saw some things. I wasn't about to come running to you with rumors. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. What did you see? Derek hesitated for a second, then sighed. Look, man, I'm not trying to stir shit up, but I saw her once. A couple weeks ago. She was at some bar downtown with a guy. They weren't exactly being discreet. I felt something inside me twist. Where? He rattled off the name of a place I knew. A place she had never mentioned. A place I had never been with her. I inhaled slowly, forcing down the wave of anger that threatened to break loose. You want to know who he is? Derek asked, watching me carefully. Yeah, I said, my voice tight. I do. Derek nodded, flicked his cigarette onto the ground, and gave me a name. A name I recognized. A name that made my blood run cold. Daniel, the same guy I caught in my house. I turned back toward my car, my mind already working, my next move already forming. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat in my car for a long time after Derek left, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My head was spinning, not just from what I had seen tonight, but from what I had just learned. Emily hadn't just been careless or caught up in the moment. She had been reckless, sloppy enough that even people like Derek had noticed. It made me wonder just how many others had seen it, how many people had looked at me, laughed behind my back, pitted me while I walked around completely unaware that my wife was making a fool of me. The thought made my stomach turn. I wasn't the type to sit back and do nothing. If Emily wanted to throw away everything we had, then fine, but she wasn't going to walk away from this clean. She wasn't going to play the victim or twist the story, so she came out looking innocent. I had been humiliated once, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, stopping at one name. Mark. He had told me not to let her get into my head. And he was right, but I needed someone to talk to, someone who would understand why I wasn't just going to let this go. I hit the call button and waited. Steve. Mark's voice was groggy, like I had woken him up. Yeah, I said. I need to see you. There was a pause before he exhaled heavily. Where are you? Gas station off 5th, I said. Stay there, he muttered. I'll be there in 10. He wasn't lying. 10 minutes later, Mark pulled up next to me, stepping out of his car with a look that told me he already knew this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. He leaned against the hood of my car, arms crossed. She call you? He asked. She tried, I said. I didn't answer. Good, he nodded. What's going through your head? I hesitated for a second before I spoke. I want to make her pay for this. Mark didn't flinch. He didn't tell me to calm down or to let it go. He just studied me for a moment before nodding slowly. All right. How? That was the question, wasn't it? I had already taken the first step by throwing her out, but that wasn't enough. She needed to feel what I was feeling. She needed to understand what it meant to lose everything because of her own choices. She works at that marketing firm, right? Mark asked. I nodded. Yeah. And the guy? Daniel, I said through clenched teeth. He works there too. Mark let out a low whistle. That's bold. Fucking her in the same place they both get their paychecks. He shook his head. You thinking about telling her boss? The thought had crossed my mind. Emily's company had strict rules about relationships between employees, especially when one of them was in a higher position. She had been at that firm for years, worked her way up to a good position. If she got caught breaking policy, it wouldn't just be a slap on the wrist. It would cost her everything. She's worked too hard for that job. I muttered, though even as I said it, I knew I didn't care about protecting her career anymore. She worked hard for you too, Mar pointed out. Didn't stop her from throwing that away. He had a point. Emily had made her choices, and now it was time for her to deal with the consequences. Mark watched me carefully. So, you want to do this or not? I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I do. He smirked. Then let's get to work. I spent the rest of the night in my car, parked outside Mark's house, going over everything I knew, every detail that could be used against Emily. The anger was still there, burning in my chest, but now it had direction. I wasn't going to be the guy who let his wife cheat on him and walk away like nothing happened. If she thought she could humiliate me and move on with her life untouched, she was about to learn how wrong she was. Mark sat across from me in his driveway, leaning against the hood of his car, watching me carefully as I scrolled through my phone. You ready to do this? He asked after a while. I didn't look up. Yeah. You sure? His voice was calm, but there was something in it that told me he wasn't going to let me half-ass this. Because once we start, there's no stopping. You can't go soft halfway through. I finally met his gaze. I'm not backing down. Good, he said with a nod. Then let's figure this out. The first step was simple, gather everything. I already had enough evidence to prove she had been cheating, but I needed more than just my own word. Emily had made it easy, leaving enough of a trail that all it took was a little digging. I started with her email, something she had used on our shared laptop before we both got our own. She had never logged out, probably assuming I wouldn't check. She was wrong. There were messages, some from Daniel, others from a private email she thought was hidden. They weren't just casual exchanges. There were full conversations about meeting up, about making sure nobody at work found out, about the night she had spent with him while I was under the impression she was out with coworkers. Mark leaned over, looking at the screen. That's enough to bury her right there. I exhaled sharply. Yeah, we weren't stopping there. Next was her work. Emily had been at the firm for years, worked her way up to a position where she was trusted with clients, budgets, and everything in between. Their company had a strict policy. Relationships between employees were fine as long as they were disclosed. But she hadn't disclosed anything. If she had, Daniel wouldn't have been sneaking around, making sure no one at the office saw them together. If the firm found out now, it wouldn't just be an HR slap on the wrist. It would be a career-ending mistake. Mark smirked. So, how do you want to play this? I clenched my jaw, scrolling through her messages one last time. We send everything. To HR, to her boss, to anyone who needs to see it. You want to do it now? I hesitated, not because I was having second thoughts, but because I wanted it to hurt. Emily had walked out of my house thinking she could still control the damage, thinking she could manipulate the situation if she just talked to me enough. I wanted her to feel comfortable for just a little longer, to think she still had a chance to save herself. Tomorrow, I said finally. Let her think she's getting away with it for one more night. Mark nodded in approval. Cold. I like it. We sat in silence for a while, both knowing that by this time tomorrow, Emily's life would be completely different. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt in control again. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, no anger clouding my thoughts. Everything was clear now. I wasn't just a man who had been cheated on. I wasn't some victim sitting around, wallowing in self-pity while Emily moved on like nothing happened. Today, I was the one in control, and she was about to learn exactly what that meant. I got up, took a shower, and sat down on my laptop with my coffee, scrolling through the messages one last time. Every email, every detail, every piece of evidence was lined up perfectly. Emily had given me everything I needed without even realizing it. Mark texted me while I was going through everything. Mark, you sure you want to go through with this? I stared at the message for a moment before typing back. Me, it's already done. And it was. I had spent the last few hours preparing everything. Emails, screenshots, timestamps, all wrapped up in a neat little package and sent directly to her company's HR department, with her boss CC'd for good measure. I didn't write much in the email itself. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. No explanations, no accusations. Just proof. Cold, undeniable proof. Once I hit send, there was no taking it back, but I didn't want to take it back. I wanted her to feel the same helplessness I had felt when I walked into that bedroom and saw her sitting there with him. I sat back and took a slow sip of coffee, my heartbeat steady. There was no rush of satisfaction, no wave of relief. I wasn't doing this to feel better. I was doing this because it needed to be done. Emily had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Mark called a few minutes later, his voice quieter than usual. So that's it? You sent it? Yeah, I said. He exhaled. Damn. How do you feel? Like it's done. I said simply. There was a pause. You know she's going to call you, right? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I know, and she did. Not even an hour later, my phone buzzed on the table, her name flashing across the screen over and over again. I didn't answer the first time, or the second. By the third, I picked up, but I didn't say anything. I just let her sit there in silence, breathing heavily on the other end of the line. Steve, she finally said, her voice shaking. What did you do? I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. What do you mean? Don't play dumb, she snapped, her panic barely contained. I just got pulled into HR. They know, Steve. They know everything. I didn't say anything. I wanted her to keep talking, to dig her own grave even deeper. They're talking about firing me, she continued, her voice breaking. Do you have any idea what you've done? I let out a short breath. I didn't do anything, Emily. You did this to yourself. She let out a choked sob. You could have just talked to me. We could have worked through this, but instead you ruined my life. I laughed, a cold, empty sound. Ruined your life? You think I ruined your life? You did that the second you decided to fuck some guy behind my back. You did that when you lied to me every day for months. This isn't me ruining your life, Emily. This is just you finally facing the consequences of your own choices. She went quiet, breathing unevenly. Then, in a whisper, she asked, Was this always your plan? I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to sit with that question, to wonder how long I had been thinking about this, how long I had been one step ahead while she thought she was still in control. I told you to leave, I said finally. I told you we were done. You should have just walked away. She sniffled. I didn't think you'd actually do this. I closed my eyes, feeling nothing. Then you never really knew me at all. And with that, I hung up. Emily didn't call again after I hung up, but I knew it wasn't over. She wasn't the type to just accept defeat and disappear. She needed to have the last word, to spin some version of events where she wasn't the villain. I wasn't surprised when she showed up at the house later that evening, banging on the door like she had the right to demand anything from me. I didn't answer at first, letting her stand outside for a while, forcing her to sit with everything that had happened. I wanted her to feel exactly what I'd felt. The helplessness, the uncertainty, the realization that no matter how much she begged, she wasn't in control anymore. After a few more minutes, I opened the door. She looked like hell. Her hair was a mess, her eyes red and swollen, her face tense with barely contained frustration. She had always been good at presenting herself, always polished, always in control. But now, she looked like someone who had lost everything. And she had. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. She walked past me and into the living room, hesitating for a second before turning to face me. "You got me fired," she said, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. I leaned against the wall, studying her. "No, you got yourself fired." Her jaw clenched. "Do you even care?" "Should I?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around her arms, and for a second, she just stood there, breathing heavily. "I know you're angry," she started, her voice more controlled now, like she was trying to regain some sense of power in the conversation. "And I know I hurt you, but what you did—" I cut her off before she could finish. "What I did," I repeated, shaking my head. "You're really standing here, trying to make me the bad guy? After everything you did?" She exhaled sharply. "I'm not saying I didn't mess up." "Messed up?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You didn't mess up, Emily. You made a choice. Over and over again. And now, you're dealing with the consequences of that choice. You don't get to stand here and act like you're the victim." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You wanted revenge." I didn't deny it. "Yeah, I did." She swallowed hard, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "So what now? We just never talk again? We pretend like the last 8 years never happened." I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "Emily, I don't know what you expected when you walked through that door. Did you think I was going to forgive you? Did you think I was going to feel bad for you? Because I don't. You lost your job, your reputation, and whatever respect people had for you. But none of that is on me. That's on you." She looked away, biting her lip. "I didn't want it to end like this." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to cheat," I said coldly. Her shoulders dropped slightly, the fight in her finally starting to fade. "I loved you," she whispered. I let out a slow breath, feeling nothing but exhaustion now. "No, you didn't. You loved the idea of me. You loved the comfort, the security. But if you really loved me, you wouldn't have done what you did." She wiped at her eyes, nodding slowly. "So that's it. That's it," I said. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. She just stood there for a few more seconds before finally turning toward the door. She paused just before stepping outside, looking back at me one last time. "Goodbye, Steve." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "Goodbye, Emily." And then she was gone.